Welcome to the final session of the School Board Training Academy. If we've not met, I'm Dr. Tracy Frederick, Director of Engagement and Strategy for the Kansas School Board Resource Center, here with my Executive Director, Ward Cassidy, and we are pleased that you're able to join us tonight for Lesson 5 and 6, Being Effective, Asking Probing Questions, and Representing Your Community, with Dave Trabert, CEO of Kansas Policy Institute and the author of 8 Things to Know About Running for School Board. If you're new to these sessions, you are live with us in this room, so we invite you to keep your camera on, especially when you're asking questions. If you prefer, I can ask questions for you. Just put those in the chat box below, and I'll ask those at the appropriate time. We do ask that you please mute your microphone if you have background noise going on until you ask a question or you're interacting. Also, this session is being recorded, as you just heard. As always, I'll send you the link to this recording for you to review again. And please, we invite you to share with others who may be interested. You'll also be able to find the recordings along with all of the recordings of these sessions and the PowerPoint slides on our workshop video portion of our website. So I think those are the housekeeping things that I need to tell you. And so let's go ahead and get started, Dave. I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So we were talking about having a plan of action and understanding like what does each one of these groups think of you? And of course, with board members, there could be three or four different perceptions among them. But what are their perceptions that are perhaps you need to correct? Um, what are the things you want to, what are the key points you want to make? And what do you want to learn from them? It's people are going to be much more likely to engage if it's, you want to explain who you are, but you tell them that I'm here to learn about you and how we can maybe work together and so forth. Uh, it's doing this is not a one and done. It's not like you're going to have one meeting with a board member and that board member is going to get it or the superintendent. In the advertising business, they'll say you need to hear an ad some people between 3 and 5 times before you even start to remember it. It doesn't sink in. You don't know, it's not, you haven't really absorbed it, but the first 3 to 5 times, they might not get anything. So you want to keep in mind you're always looking for opportunities to reinforce who you are. And obviously, if it's someone who's somewhat hostile, it's going to take longer, but don't give up. You look for opportunities to reinforce your purpose everywhere. One thing, if your local newspaper is open to selecting or accepting op-eds, submit a letter to the editor, submit a guest column, and think about doing that periodically, not every month. They'll get tired of that, but don't wear out your welcome. But in Lansing, another way of getting being effective was this goes back maybe 3 years now. There was a board member who was wanting to have a conversation at the school board meeting about student achievement. And we have this goofy thing in Kansas where the control of the agenda has kind of been ceded to the president in many cases. And then you have to either convince the president to let you get something on the agenda or get a majority board vote. Well, this lady was not able to do that. And so she politely said, okay, well, at the board meeting, that's unfortunate because I really want to have this conversation. I want to get feedback from my community because we're not going to improve unless we understand what the challenges are. So next Thursday, or 2 weeks from now, whatever, at the community center, I'm going to host a town hall meeting, and I hope everybody comes out. Teachers, parents, we want to have a conversation. That was another way of being effective. You want to do your homework on the major issues. What are the obviously we're focused here on student achievement, But what other issues, big issues, are going on in the community? And you just want to learn, get the background, get different perspectives on it. And then you want to develop some talking points and elevator speeches. An elevator speech is, in case you're not familiar with that, it's being able to explain, like if someone says, "Oh, what is Kansas Policy Institute? What do you do?" From the time it takes that elevator door to close to get to the when that person's going to get off, you have to effectively explain um, that answer that question. So, what's the most important thing that you want to get across? Having some talking points that in a case of a longer conversation, having some talking points in mind, and again, write those down. It helps me because once I've written something down, I can almost sometimes visualize it on the paper as I'm talking. I can kind of check it off in my mind. Okay, what's next? Uh, Reinforcing your purpose would be one of these. Student outcomes, spending per student is another topic. In Kansas, we do the building needs assessment. We talked about that last week. Another thing that you might consider is to have a website. I know of some board members who converted their campaign website to a school board member website. This would be you're probably going to have that for a campaign, and that's the first place you're going to introduce yourself to everyone. Or have a Facebook page that is just dedicated to your work on the school board, and keep that updated. It's a way of communicating with your constituents as well. Um, you want to, I'd really recommend that you go to the superintendent and ask for some very specific budget information that you can use to reinforce your purpose. Per student spending by function. And by that I mean things like instruction, administration, transportation, and how has it changed over the last 5 years. We talked about that last week from lesson 4. The You want to look also for the budgetary changes that were enacted or should have been on the building needs assessment. So last spring, the district looked at the building needs. If they did it properly, they would have identified barriers to proficiency within a school, and then they would have identified how they were going to change the budget to overcome those barriers. So I would say, can we get some specifics and ask where in the budget can I find that? Now, I'll almost guarantee you won't find that in the budget, but ask for it. You're wanting to start, and again, this is just part of. I want to be thorough. I want to be learning what we're doing and what the background is. July 1 cash balance for every fund over the last 5 years. Now, for those of you in Kansas, we have that on Kansas Open Gov. You can get it, and that might be a good way of verifying that what you get is accurate or complete. But when you ask for this information, if you ask for it, it's going to continue to reinforce that I'm someone who's going to be thorough and understand how the money flows in our district. You can judiciously use the Army form of discipline. The story I told you about in Lansing about having the board member having her own town hall meeting. That was an example of the Army form of discipline, where we call it that because the Army can't make a soldier do something, but they can make he or she pretty damn unhappy, sad that they didn't do it. So you can use that. If you're unable to get all the budget information you requested, here's one example. When it comes time to vote on the budget, if you haven't gotten what you requested and you want to make sure it's reasonable, then you can say, I'm sorry, but I can't vote on this budget because I didn't get this very specific information. And I don't know, maybe the budget is very good, but I just don't have what I need to make an informed decision. So tonight I'm going to have to vote no. And hopefully in the future I can get that information. If we talked about unable to get student achievement review on the board agenda, there are ways to go around that. If you're not allowed to participate in the building needs assessment, uh, uh, remember you want to not, if you can, avoid surprising people at board meetings. Ask the superintendent, ask the board president in advance. I understand that state law says local school boards shall conduct meetings and go in and learn here directly from teachers and principals and so forth. When are we going to do that? I want to be involved. And you do those things in writing so you have a paper trail. And then you can bring it up at the board meeting. And again, if you're not getting what you want, just very professionally explain, ask again. You know what the answer is going to be, but they've been given fair warning, and you're demonstrating again to everyone in the room or watching online that you're trying to take a very logical approach to help improve student achievement in your district. Show me your work, or trust but verify, as President Reagan said, is another great tactic for being effective when you're in the minority. So we've heard from a variety of school board members. They might have the district attorney, lawyers say, no, we can't do that. The business office superintendent, other board members may, and they may be right, uh, but you could respond with, really, I hadn't heard that. Where can I find that whatever so I can learn more? Make them show you their work. Sometimes we have found that even lawyers or other board members, business managers, they give you bad information and they don't know that they're doing that because they're repeating what they thought was true. So always ask, and then because then there's probably going to be some more details that you really need to know. Anticipating challenges
The
to your
question,
education.
there's a question. So those great questions that you pointed out that you could ask. There's someone on the call who would like to know these items being asked for, are these board members need to ask, or can I ask these as a concerned citizen?
Oh, concerned citizens can ask as well. Absolutely, that's a great question. You may not get what you want, and you have to understand how the open records laws work because some school districts or cities are pretty good about giving you a little bit of information, but a lot of them just kind of have an unfortunate protective reaction, and they'll try to find a way to say no. And so in the case of open records, if you're asking for something, it needs to be very specific, and you cannot force a government entity in Kansas to create a record. If the information exists somewhere, they can print it out, send you a link, whatever, send you a copy of a report, but you can't ask them to assemble something. So keep that in mind and be, but absolutely. I mean, this is where we get a lot of our information, asking for things of this nature. They're used to it now because we do it every year. But sure, a lot of people can do that, and it's good. It could actually, this information could help you decide whether you want to run for school board if after you see some of the information. So challenges to your education credentials. We've seen this happen a lot where if you're talking about something that is maybe just a little bit controversial, like change, or even asking, do we need to have a change? At some point, you may be hit with something to the effect of, well, why should we listen to you? You're not an educator. Um, and there's a way to handle that, and it's uh, no, I'm not, but it's not the board member's role to tell teachers what to do or to recommend any particular curriculum. The board's role is to set achievement goals and approve the staff's plan to accomplish the goals. So that's how you can respond to that. No, that's not my job. We have professionals for that. Moving into asking probing questions here. Start with I think. Um, or if you start with I think, that's going to put some people, it's like you want to tell them something. It's just human nature again. Someone's trying to tell me I've got something wrong. Um, but if you use a statement to set up a question, you can say, I heard that we do something, and I'd like to ask a few questions to get a better understanding. And I'm not questioning why, I just want to learn more. And that can be, you could be a board member for in year 4 and still this would still be a very appropriate way to start a conversation. Um, when you're asking questions, anybody who's ever seen a, a, a law show on television, you see there's different styles of cross-examining a witness. Um, and I say it like this because what you want to do when you're asking questions is get some very specific information. Lawyers aren't allowed to testify. They have to get the witness to testify. And if you're cross-examining like a child or a crime victim, they have to be really gentle in how they ask questions. They still have to get the answer, but you're extra careful in setting something up. It's like, look, I'm not questioning why we're doing something. I just need to learn. And so I'd appreciate you getting some of your expertise. Really thinking about that in dealing with a sympathetic witness. I talked a little bit earlier. Make notes in advance and rehearse. You from lesson 5, the 6 powers of persuasion. Power number 1 is you are the message. You want to rehearse what you're going to say, so you walk in, you know what you're going to say. You've already practiced your opening. If I don't do that, I find myself jumping right into the question and forgetting to do the setup, to kind of set the stage. I forget that I'm the message. You can use your rookie status or some self-deprecation if you're a veteran board member. So if you're a veteran board member, then you could a little self-deprecation. You may have told me this before, but I have a bad habit of not remembering something if I don't write it down. So let me ask you again. Is a way of getting into an issue. It's really important if you're dealing with a situation. This is a real life situation that we've had to deal with a lot in Kansas. Someone is telling you something that's not accurate. Uh, they may not realize it's not accurate, but you can't tell them they're wrong if you want them to really listen. I mean, some people might, but approach it as you want to help them walk away from something they thought was true. So here in Kansas, we routinely hear that the state only provides $5,000 per student to operate schools, and obviously that sounds like not much money. And so you could say, I've heard that also, and that really kind of shocked me. So I did my own research, and I found this report on the Kansas Department of Education website that said state funding last year averaged almost $12,000. Now, I couldn't figure out where the 5 came from, but then someone else told me that it's really the starting point in the formula, and then there's a lot more added. And the total, that was just the state. When you throw in the federal and the local aid, the Department of Education said the total was over $18,000. Now, that sounds a lot more reasonable to me. What about you? And it's just been someone might say, well, you're wrong, because I've had this happen. That's not true. It's not right. Okay, well, I'm just telling you what I found. If you find something different, would you? I mean, I'd really like to learn more. If I got something wrong here, then tell me. Send me. Make sure. Here's my email address. Send it to me. Okay. You don't want to extend the argument, but find a way to gently walk away from that. Humor can be a nice way of diffusing a situation. Some of this might sound repetitive if you were on at Melanie's seminar or watched her video, but humor is a way to diffuse a situation. So let's say somebody comes up with a proposal and it's like, well, maybe we should have a policy in case this happens. And that'll never happen. We don't need to worry about that. Nobody would ever do that. Well, there's actually one humorous way you can deal with that. Maybe not, but history abounds with examples of really smart people not accurately predicting the future. Like, for example, Thomas Watson, the former chairman of IBM, this was in 1943, said, I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. It was pretty wrong. There's a number of examples. I think we have 2 or 3 more in the book, but it's like so we never know. And I just want to have the conversation. Maybe there's no need to do it, but can we take a few minutes and talk about it? Candidates want to email the superintendent about the district's goals. What are the achievement goals? Email because you're creating a paper trail. This is something that if the goals exist, that it should be readily available to you. And so ask a question like, has the school board set student achievement improvement goals to be attained by a certain date? Like in like the state average is 33%. So do we have something that says we're going to go from 33% of students proficient in math to 50% in 5 years? Ask a question like that. Um, if they have ask if they say yes, okay, where can I see that? Or if they just give you the numbers, still, where can that be found? And you want to look at it for reasonableness. If they're saying they want to go from 33% proficient to 50% in 2 years, well, that's not going to happen. Um, and if not, if they don't have this, then you might have a campaign platform. Most likely, you would find out that the district does not have specific achievement goals. What they probably will tell you, and this because this is what they have, is well, we want to be the best. We have this plan in place, and we're going to have dramatic improvement, and there's going to be a lot of good, well-intended outcomes they'd like to reach, but nothing specific. And it's not to present that as a criticism, but we have to. It's like the first step in solving any problem is understanding where we are, acknowledging that today this is the problem that exists. And the only way we're going to fix that is after we acknowledge it, then we have to say, where do we want to go? I want to go from here to there in this amount of time. Surprisingly, our district and I guess a lot of districts don't approach it that way. And I think we might be able to do a much better job if we had really specific goals in place. What do you think? So another one, I'd like to learn more about our curriculum. Where can I find the curriculum and the lesson plans that we give new teachers? We hear an awful lot that brand new teachers out of college are having to go to Google to find lesson plans, to put work to get to figure out how they're going to run their class. There was an example from, I think, a board member in Virginia that I wrote about in the book, where when the board started digging into questions of this nature, they discovered that the district didn't have a curriculum. They had textbooks, but they didn't have anything that a plan that was in place of how they were going to teach. Everybody just had textbooks and did what they want. So that was something that really had to change. As I said, this is a way of learning if there is anything in place, and it helps you learn whether the district has any kind of embedded, and this can be unintentional, but there often is some kind of embedded social or political elements in curriculum or in teacher training program. Taking a look at that and understanding can really inform. Maybe that can be part of the problem. One of the barriers, we're not actually focusing on the basics. Teacher preparation can be a major barrier to success. So, one question you could ask is the National Council on Teacher Quality says some universities do a better job of preparing teachers than others. Who can get me a list showing where each elementary teacher completed college in our district? It's always, obviously, it's going to be on the resumes. It's something that would have to be put together. So I'm not looking for this like tomorrow, but could I get it maybe in a couple of weeks? Here's why this is important. If you've been on these calls before, I apologize because I know I've told this story before. We were doing one of our training seminars a couple of years ago on the building needs assessment. And one board member said, "Hey, Ward, this is brilliant. I don't know why we're not doing it, but would you come with me and help me get it started?" So Ward and the board member meet, the superintendent is there, they go to an elementary school, all the teachers are there, and the principal, and even a few other people who were really interested. It was kind of a novel thing to sit down and talk about what are the barriers to proficiency. So they start asking the questions, and pretty soon one teacher puts her hand up and she says, I don't feel like I know how to teach kids how to read. And sure, there were some gasps in the room. The superintendent, the principal, the board member, shocked. What do you mean? And she said, well, I just didn't get that training in college. And pretty quickly, all but one other teacher said, yeah, me too. And unfortunately, there are universities in every state that have different ways of teaching the kids how to read. It's not based on the science of reading. And so you need to understand if you have teachers going to schools, and we talk about this in the book. There's a link where you can go find how every state does on their evaluation. You have some states like Wichita State in Kansas gets an A plus, but we have some D's and F's in Kansas too. And we also have a couple of universities that we don't know what they have because they wouldn't share their information with NCTQ. That's Emporia State and Kansas State. They might have a good program, we don't know. But two things are important about this. If you know you have teachers who didn't go to those schools, they're probably going to be needing some training. Now in Kansas, they're supposed to be getting it anyway. But in other states, if you don't have a program in place where every teacher must get certification in the science of reading, that's something that probably needs to be part of your professional development. Um, it's also something that the superintendent should be aware of, and because the board might want to have a policy of we're not going to hire teachers who went to a university with a D or an F rating from NCTQ, or if they weren't able to rate the program. I'd take that one step further and suggest having the board president write a letter to those universities and encourage them to start teaching using the science of reading and tell them this is why we're concerned about it. And unfortunately, we don't feel like we can hire teachers from your university if they're not getting this training. Don't chase shiny objects. There's a growing tendency around the country to have where school boards are being hit with things like, we need to provide daycare, or we need to do something about affordable housing because it's a major barrier to attracting teachers. It's just too expensive. We need to do that to help us attract, and that's the way it's usually been presented. And I would respond to that by saying, I worry that whatever the proposal is really just treating a symptom. Shouldn't we strike at the root of the problem by raising teacher pay? Now, that's going to be met likely with, well, we don't have the money for that. Well, if that's really important to have, if compensation is a reason you're not attracting teachers, that's a pretty high priority. You need to find the money. There's an example in the book of District 11 in Colorado Springs. They discovered that they were, I think it was about 20% below the regional average for starting pay. They were at 40,000, and the average around Colorado Springs was 50,000. So they knew they had to do that, and if they raised starting pay, they were going to have to raise pay for other teachers. They found a way to do it. They charged their superintendent with finding the money to do it, and even though even former board members and some teachers were saying, "Look, we'd like to see this, but there's no way that's going to happen." They made it happen. They reallocated their budgets, and they were able to raise the pay. So, it is a really serious problem. This is an abbreviation of a table in the book looking at the changes in inflation adjusted current spending per student and teacher pay. Current spending excludes debts and capital outlay. And what you see national average is per student spending is up 50%, but teacher pay was down 6.5%. That means they had 6.5% less purchasing power today than they had 30 years ago. In Kansas, it's about the same. The teachers are worse off in Kansas. Some states like Minnesota and Wyoming there are down 4 to 5%. Kansas is down more than 14%, with a 51% increase in per student spending adjusted for inflation. In other words, the money was there, but for whatever reason, and one of those reasons could be we didn't realize it, but for whatever reason, the money was spent on other things. And so this would be something of this nature, or maybe something else, something that's a real distraction. It's certainly not your expertise in affordable housing or daycare. But it really is an opportunity to draw attention back to where do we need to allocate our money. And you'll find out pretty quickly how willing some people are to go do that. It's hard work. That's one resistance. If you're going to have to obviously make some significant changes in your budget. That's going to create some angst. But this is part of this one of the big steps toward improving student outcomes. Finally, here, moving into lesson 8, represent your community. Board members obviously are not elected to represent your own views. The district will probably tell you you're there to represent the district. I respectfully disagree with that. You have to represent your community, the people who elected you. And not just the ones who voted for you, but the entire community. You have to understand what your community expects. A.J. Crable says school systems exist for one reason and one reason only, to improve student outcomes. And school systems can only exist to improve what students know and are able to do. They are, and he goes on to talk about the connective tissue between the community and the district. There's obviously a lot of other things that the district is going to deal with and the board will deal with, but your purpose is to improve student outcomes. So you have to know what is the vision for the community's goal for outcomes. Uh, the values are the guardrails. So the goal is, the vision is a goal. We want to go from 43% to 50% in 2 years. The values are the guardrails. Those are the kind of, be sure you do these things or be sure you don't do those things. So here's an example of the community's goal to be at 75% in reading and math by 2035. So about 10 years. If you were at, or if you're at 30% now, that's 10 points a year. That's, or four, no, 4 year. That's pretty, that could be ambitious, but the board's plan to achieve this goal may not include any kind of school closures or any or social promotion. Um, Social promotion is advancing kids, whether they're ready to go on to the next grade or not. Um, your rationale has to be grounded in looking at issues in representing your community. So it's not, I think, everything starts with my constituents tell me. And when you can use this to, it really is liberating. It has kind of a de-escalating effect where you're saying, please understand, I'm only telling you what I'm hearing from constituents. Isn't that what we were all elected to do? I'm not arguing with you. I'm not telling you you're wrong or anything. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing from our community, and that's my obligation, is to represent the people in our community. Differentiating between inputs, outputs, and outcomes is really important. There can be a lot of confusion if you don't understand the difference. You could be headed off in the wrong direction. Um, so graduation rates, going to college or a trade school are adult outputs. That's what, in Kansas, they call it post-secondary success. Well, it's something that may be worth looking at, but neither of those are measures of what a student knows and is able to do. That is, those are outcomes. Inputs are curriculum, money. Outputs, a graduation rate is something that results either near the end of a cycle or periodically that you can look at, but it's not a measure of what students know and are able to do, just the outcomes. So I want to, and again, I've probably told a little bit of this story before, but it really bears repeating. Um, we are working, well, Dr. Frederick is working with the Waubonsee School District, and they, when they did their listening tour to understand the vision and values of the community, uh, ending social promotion was one of the guardrails. The community was shocked to learn that it was district policy to promote kids through the eighth grade, whether they were ready to go on or not. And the audience said, that stops now. And the board got its direction from the community. They were told, we want you to raise achievement scores. They talked about unintended consequences of social emotional learning. They heard that from students. I think it was a pretty robust discussion, but it wasn't like pitchforks and torches. Um, but it was because Tracy's very nice. She runs a very calm meeting and just keeps everybody on an even keel, but really pulls out the information, and you find out, well, what do you think about, and that itself, how to do those meetings could be a whole webinar. Other things that came up that informed the conversation: honesty, integrity, pride in the county and the community, hard work, grit, diligence. These are different kinds of guardrails that the community talked about. They said they wanted kids to know how to think critically, organize and prioritize, strategically attack problems, and work independently. These are the kinds of skills that it I think it impacts the way that subjects are taught. It's, rote memorization. You need to memorize your multiplication tables. Uh, but how you solve a problem is part of the learning process. We want kids to learn how to think, in other words, writing skills, grammar skills, all kinds of things that came out from the community. And I imagine some board members thought, well, yeah, that makes sense, no surprise. But hearing it and writing it down and making sure that these are our guardrails and these are things we want to focus on, that message needs to be conveyed throughout the staff in the district. Uh, this was a good one. They wanted to, this was Waubonsee is a district that was comprised of three different towns, and they were separate at one point. Now it's all one district. And so there was kind of a Hatfields and McCoys, I think, from some of the adults that are still around from the days of consolidation. And one of the students spoke up and said, look, we hear you guys talk about bickering between communities. We don't see that in our school. So it's like we all get along. Let's forget about those things. And it was driving a lot of activity at the board, whether it was where to do something, how to spend money. It was a serious undercurrent at a lot of board meetings. We do a public opinion survey periodically, and the last time we did this, I think it was 2022. We asked the question, how do you respond to this statement? Um, Parents should have the final say in the education of their child. Well, 84% of people with kids or grandkids in public school said yes, they should have the final say. That's not surprising. It's probably that way, varying a degree or two in most communities. The same survey found 66% of people were concerned that their child may be exposed to controversial material. Now, this is something we'll probably renew this again. It's been a while, so we'll test the question again just so it's current. But knowing information like this, then everything you do, it should be opt-in. In other words, you have to get the parents' permission if we're going to have this, teach this type of sex education. We're going to have this kind of a presentation. If the district thinks it is, and you'll have policies, a lot of districts have some policies on opt-in or opt-out. But knowing this kind of background, that these are the values of the values of the community, everything would be opt-in. So we don't do it unless the parents say, yes, you may. Uh, what if the majority disagrees with a statement like schools should teach elementary students that there are more than two genders? I mean, these are the kinds of questions that you can even ask. You don't have the scientific answer, but a board member or a candidate could just, if you know that something like that is taking place, or you've talked to parents who are concerned that it might take place, how do you respond to this? And if that's the way it is, then this is one thing. Discussing gender issues with elementary students, or saying that the United States is an inherently racist nation, well, that violates the community values. And the community values are the basis for having the conversation. Um, it cannot be about if your values. It has to be something that's representing the community's values, um, and make sure that district's actions don't run against the community values. We're almost done here. Um, this is a chart that we grabbed from Jonathan Haidt's book called The Anxious Mind. Mental health issues come up a lot. And so how do you represent that? What do your community want? Haidt says that smartphones and social media, the research shows that those two are major causes of the rise in depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts. You can see here that it was between 2004 and 2010, there wasn't much difference. And then there was a sharp rise, and the gray box indicates the time frame when smartphones were really becoming universally prevalent with most students in a school. And of course, that gets the access to the social media. And this is where they've seen the tremendous increase. 100 girls, by the way, the percentage increase was larger for boys because it was a smaller number. But girls, height says the research shows that girls are much more susceptible to the pressure that comes from the societal pressure. And so you want to be thinking about what impact uh, conversations like gender identity, especially with elementary kids. You know, it's a mental health is an issue that comes up as when I look at a lot of building needs assessments, it's pretty common to say, well, we have mental health issues. Well, one of the first things you can do is make sure that your district isn't doing anything to contribute to mental health issues. It would be a good basis to have that conversation that maybe we should stop doing some of the things we're doing or limit it to children of a certain age. This is a quote from an email that a Kansas state senator read in a legislative hearing and indicates the kinds of things. I don't know which district it was. It was from the it was Senator Baumgardner, so it was somewhere in Johnson or Miami County, probably. Um, my child is biracial, and the child has to decide is one parent bad or one parent good. Which one is good or bad because of their skin color? Um, I mean, actually, the assignment for today for an elementary school was to write a sentence that explains why you're sorry for being white. I hope that this is not going on in your school districts. Um, it's just inexcusable. But you have to understand, obviously, that would not represent the values of the community. But sometimes it can appear rather innocent. This is pretty deliberate and in your face. But it's certainly teaching those things is not representing the community. So that was my last slide. I will leave the slides up here in case anybody wants me to go back or something, but let's talk. What are your questions? And it doesn't have to be what we talked about tonight. If you have something else like school finance questions, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I have one question. It's actually it was two slides back, and you were talking about if the majority of the group doesn't agree with these statements. I actually missed what you were trying to communicate. And
Oh, okay. Okay. So if this, let's say there was a survey that asked people, how do you respond to this? Should the school teach elementary students that there's more than two genders? I imagine if that was in a public opinion poll, you would get a pretty large no on that. Sometimes, I mean, these are types of things that we know have taken place. Uh, when in the previous slide, when I was talking about the 84% of Kansans said parents should have the final say in the education of their children. Certainly, that would mean that we shouldn't be doing things like this. If we didn't ask those questions in the survey, but if we had, I imagine it would be in the 80 or 90% range that they would say no. And so if you're doing it and you know that's what your community feels, you really have an obligation to stop it. Does that help? Good. Thanks for asking. That's sometimes I go too fast over something. Anyone else?
Yeah, Dave, I have a question about doing a community survey. How do you get something like that done? Because I think that can be a very powerful tool to use.
Yeah, Tracy, you want to jump in here and talk a little bit about how you did that with Waubonsie? You're talking
We
about the
did
community listening sessions or a public opinion poll, Nancy?
we did both.
Okay.
So is there one or the other that would be more helpful for you, Nancy?
No, you're
Actually,
muted.
I wouldn't mind hearing what you think the pros and cons are for each of those.
Well, we had listening sessions, but we waited to do the survey until after the listening sessions because we wanted people to come together. Because, as you know, when people get together in a room, just like even in this, one person may say something that reminds somebody else of some other idea or a question or may spurn a thought. So we had those listening sessions. We did not publicize that we were going to have the survey until after those were closed. And then I worked with the district to put together a survey, very short. One of the things you want to think about whenever you're distributing surveys, you probably know you don't want to have survey fatigue where you have 20 questions, or just the other day, I had a doctor, went to a doctor's appointment. It says this is going to take you 10 minutes to finish. So you want to have a very short survey, no more than probably 12 questions. And so I worked with the district to put those together. And it's very important if you do have town hall listening sessions and you have a survey, you're asking exactly the same questions. You don't want to compare apples and oranges. You want everyone to hear the same questions. You want everyone to be able to give input on the same questions and the same topics. And so this was put out on their district website. It was also put out on their Facebook page. It was distributed via email, and so shared all of that. And so then all of those answers came to us or came to me. And then I put all of that information together, compiled it together, and then gave it back to the district. So it was blind, and as well as all of the information from the listening sessions, compiled all of that and then put it back to the district so that all of that was generic. There was no names attached to it, and people could feel comfortable about that. It was anonymous and they could feel comfortable about giving their input.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Beth, I think, has her hand up. Yes?
Right. This is my 8th year on the Bloomington School Board in the Minneapolis metro area. And I often would bring in things to the board meeting that I had heard from constituents. But my board decided they didn't like that. And, I'd say, well, I'm hearing from parents that, this, and this. And one of the issues was, why are our libraries so biased? Because every time I go in there, there's all these posters up that are for only, one political party and nothing from the other side, or quotes from only, one ideological group, and not from another. And they just refuse to listen to me. I am the only conservative on my school board. And it has been a very difficult time. And yet, when you talk even about researching issues, and I have provided handouts to let them know this is not my opinion. And I would always say, this is not my opinion. This is information out there. But I'm not having success with that method. And I need
Okay.
help. I have 6 months left in my term. And
That's a tough one, Beth, because if you're dealing with other board members who just have their hands over their ears, you may not get anywhere. I'd say, but not to back off. The focus, maybe try a little bit different approach. Like if you could find where a news story, some other state.
Mhm,
Student comes into school wearing a Trump shirt, Trump hat.
mhm.
Uh, do we have a policy about that? You bring it up in a way of something that they're going to want to stop it. Well, then, shouldn't we be, maybe we should have a policy then that says we don't do anything because otherwise we'd be sued. Get that image planted in their mind that, oh my God, I don't want to see MAGA in the hallway.
We have a policy like that in Kansas now. Actually, one of the few good policies that KASB put out was on classroom display policies. And the part I liked about it was the argument that it opens up basically the free speech on the walls, just like if you have the clubs after school. So if you're putting one point of view on the walls, then any point of view could be. So if they're going to allow that, for instance, for one party or one ideology, then others can come in and put theirs too, whether it be a hate group or whoever declares it a hate group. If they ACLU might declare something that we wouldn't think is a hate group, but what I mean is you could end up with all sorts of things on the walls if you allow that. So that's how we went about that here in Kansas, and I could actually if you want to message me or I could put we could put that policy probably up, or
Yeah,
Dave probably could get
Tracy
it.
has both your emails. She can connect you.
Yeah, it's policy IFA, I believe it is, but it actually was a pretty decent policy. It was very controversial. We had a room full of people yelling at us about it, of course, that didn't like it, but it makes sense. It makes sense for both sides. Like you said, if you use the other side, someone that they would like to be against, most likely, like a MAGA hat, it helps them see that point of view too. And it just keeps it all out of the school because it's not focusing on student achievement, which is what they should be there for.
Anyone else? No hands up? Okay, well, we are right at about the 1 hour mark. That's probably enough for tonight. I don't want to overstay my welcome here, so I will just give myself the hook and turn it back over to Tracy.
Well, thank you so much. And we want to thank you all for joining us. Some of you have been through all of the lessons.
Oh,
But
I see a hand up.
Oh, so sorry. Oh, there you are, David. Hi.
Hello, not a problem. Wanted to make sure my video was working this time. I did meet for an hour with our high school principal this last week, and because I've got the policy change so that a board member can actually challenge a book, and I was able to successfully challenge a book. In fact, they had no concept of some of the things that were inside the library system because their policy said if New York Times bestseller, into the library it can go, or if the Library Association national says it's good, into the library it could go. Now we're going to start taking a look at that. But the question that I had asked last time around was about meeting standards and being proficient. And that was one of the questions I brought up to him. And he said the way that he explains it to people, this is just from their perspective, that meeting the standard is like meeting code versus being proficient is like a craftsman. So I said, well, I had to change a bunch of ground fault interrupter sockets in my house, and it took me about 3 or 4 hours to do. And I'm willing to bet that a craftsman could have done it in about 20 minutes. So he said, yep, that's what I mean. So just to fill you in, to let you know where that came from.
Yeah. That's one of those situations where there's not a right or wrong answer. It's just personal opinion. And so in Kansas, they're looking at like level 3 and 4 is considered proficient on the state assessment. Level 2 is considered basic. And it sounds like the principal is looking at level 2, just some basic information. But part of the definition for level 3 is to have an effective understanding of material. Now,
I,
basic is, both of those are, again, subjective, but do you want a child to have an effective understanding or a basic?
well,
And the proficient is I'd say something like an effective understanding is really what we should target. In fact, in the Kansas State assessment, they say level 3 and 4. You need to be in that in order to be considered academically prepared for life after high school. And that also, their definition of academically prepared says that you're able to do these things without the need for remediation. And it sounds like you and I both would need some remediation if we were going to do some electrical work.
and just to let you know, one of the things that I struggle with is the most vocal portion of our community, not the biggest, but the most vocal, is sports. Everything is activities after school. Vast amounts of money and time are spent looking at those types of things compared to the academic portion. Whereas one of the parents told me, he said, when there's a football championship, they have signs along the highway, brass bands, they have prep meetings or pep meetings, and they're all cheering, and somebody gets an A or a B, and it's good job, keep it up. Hey, let's go to that prep meeting over there for the football
Yeah.
game. So it's a struggle. It really is a struggle.
It is. Yeah, that's a universal challenge.
It certainly is, but to give you hope that there are districts that we have worked with that in which they said, you know what, the communities in the listening session said, we don't give enough focus on academics. We have too much focus on sports. And so just by doing that from the community, that really moved the board to, they really had a misperception of what that priority was. And so it moved the board to say, wow, okay, we're going to put more emphasis on academics.
And another thing, when wherever the conversation's taking place, and someone is pushing spending more money, say on activities or athletics, you could say, I'm not questioning. I'm interested in what you're saying, but I'm wondering, have we met all of our teachers' needs? Have we met all the needs of everyone in the classroom? And if not, I guess help me understand why we should spend money over there instead of here.
Anything else? Anyone else have some experiences in that area or questions about how to address some of those issues? All right. Well, we don't want to keep you any longer. We know that you spent a lot of time with us. We really appreciate you joining us, as I said. Also, if you have questions or need resources that we can help with, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. Dave, Ward, myself would be happy to help you. So you'll be receiving the recording just as you typically do each week, but also there will be a short survey as we were talking about, that will be distributed with that recording that I'll send. We would like to have your feedback. We always are looking to improve and to provide resources and any kind of support that we can to meet your needs, what you're dealing with. So thank you all so very much for joining us, and we hope that all goes well. Please reach out if we can help you. Have a great evening.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.